On this month's episode of Behind the Quilts, I had the chance to sit down with someone who's not only an accomplished businesswoman and quilter, she's still down to earth and incredibly inspiring. I'm so excited to share my conversation with you with the fabulous Charisma Horton. You're listening to Behind the Quilts, a podcast that gives you a look behind the curtain at our vast quilting world. My name's Rona Herman. I'm an author, teacher, blogger, and pattern designer, best known as the Traveling Quilter from RonaTheRibbitter.com. Each month, I'm sitting down with quilting industry insiders to give you a one-of-a-kind look behind the quilts. Okay, so hi, Charisma. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. So you are one seriously busy lady. Oh my gosh. Between you have, I think
everybody says that.
Yeah. I think between you said over 300 patterns, you have block-alongs this year and your YouTube appearances. What can't you do?
Well, there's a lot I can't do, but I do a lot with quilting. So, I think we all have our own gifts and talents, but, I just sort of try to work in my strengths. So, and I'm a worker bee by nature. I had 6 kids. So, when you have 6 kids, you have to do everything in an assembly line. And that's just how my brain works now. And so I just apply the same techniques to business. So everything in my life is an assembly line. I just do one task, just keep doing each end of the process. So I probably don't enjoy the process of quilting like a lot of people do if it's a hobby, but for me, it's a business, and I sort of treat it that way. So it's kind of that's
interesting because most people do get started. I've found in the business side of things, most people get started as a hobby and then that hobby turns into a business. So it's interesting that you look at it all from the business side. Was it always like that, or did it start out as a hobby?
No, it started out as a hobby, but as I keep growing, I have to keep doing things. And I do keep a little piece of things of the hobby to enjoy. So I really enjoy hand stitching and that. So I'll take my time usually and do some of those small things that I like to do. But right now with pattern design, because I started out as a long arm quilter. And so piecing and all of that was what I enjoyed about the hobby, because long arming was my work. And then when I got into pattern design, I have to get my samples made. So then all of that became work. And I do a few things on the side with my friends to piece and enjoy that part of the process and learn a new technique or something along the way. But to get 300 patterns out, you have to be doing the assembly line. There's just no other way to do it.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So are you a self-taught quilter then, or did you take classes to learn? How did that come about?
So I grew up in a really dysfunctional home, and I didn't really have somebody that taught me how to do those sorts of things, but I did develop really close friendships as a teenager, and I'm still friends with all of those ladies now. And one of the moms of one of my really longtime besties, Courtney, her mom, Courtney, Janine, and I all worked at a clinic in my very early 20s. And on her lunch break, she would stitch. And so I just asked her to teach me how to do those embroidery stitches. And then after that, I asked my grandmother-in-law, because she used to go yard selling every Friday, if she could just pick me up a, sewing machine that she found along the way so I could stitch those stitcheries together, and she said, "Oh no, I just got a new computerized machine from the Costco. So I will give you the one I got for my wedding in 19, whatever." And this is the 90s, of course. And so she went and had it all serviced and brought over this big, heavy metal Riccar machine in a desk. And that's what I learned on it. And I was so grateful. I still have the machine because it's so special to me that, I can't like part with it or anything, but I really learned on that. So that's before YouTube and, all of those things. I would buy the magazines at the grocery store because it was really the only thing I could afford at the time. And, I could spend that $5 and like look through those. And I looked through those magazines forever and ever. And I just thought one day I'm going to be that good. And so, then I had all these kids and, you're working on sewing costumes and just doing little things that you can accomplish at the kitchen table. And then it wasn't until I moved to Ephrata about 20 years ago that I started taking a class here or there, meeting up with other quilters because, I needed to find local friends. And that seemed to be who I was, found was attracted to were quilters or people from the church or, something like that. So that's really the story of how it all kind of started. And then I got a long arm and the rest was history, really.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing though? Like we did the same thing when we moved out here to North Carolina from Washington State as well. The first thing I did was we got in touch with a local quilting community and a guild, and yeah, quilters are amazing people. So do you still belong to a guild or anything? Or because I know you're moving soon, so
yeah,
that's exciting.
So it's exciting, but transition is hard. So we've been here for like almost 20 years now. And so I'm leaving all of that behind, and I haven't been going to the last couple of meetings just because my life has been, in this transition for quite some time. So my husband did tell me last night that maybe when we get to Deer Park that I can find a guild and get settled in and, figure it out. And I'm like, I'll figure it out. You always do, but it's just sad leaving my friends and,
Yeah. Well, at least we have the magic of the internet these days.
I know. Yes.
So for your designing process, how often do you put out new patterns? Because 300 plus in 4 years is a lot.
So December of 2018 is when I launched my first pattern. So it's been about 3 years, right? No, yeah,
somewhere
4
in
years.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I design a lot. I'm always putting out new stuff. So there's new stuff that I need to input into my site weekly, at least. I've been inputting stuff, but I haven't been able to do a whole lot the last couple of weeks because of the things going on. But yeah, I design a lot in batches. I work with fabric companies, and so, they get new lines. I get the swatches before they release them so that I can design patterns for them when they put them in their catalogs. And so at least every fabric company designs stuff for the seasons, right? Because it's like the fashion industry, you put out new designs all the time, but it seems to me that I seem to get designs from the various companies pretty regularly. So every month I'm sort of designing something. So what's funny is that I might be putting a new design on the website today, but I actually designed it 6 months ago when the swatches came out. So I'm always behind. And it's the same with magazines. They're always working 6 to 8, maybe 9 months ahead of time. So it's always a surprise when those get delivered to my house because I've done so much in the in-between that I've almost forgotten about that design. So it's sort of the same thing with pattern design, unless it's something that I'm just launching on my own. But if it's with a fabric company, it's, for me, I'm like, oh, I'm already working on what's coming out at Christmas that, this is okay. I need to hurry up and put it on because the fabric's in the shop now and, that sort of thing. So but it's pretty interesting. So I'm constantly designing, constantly sewing, but it's hurry up and wait. Get this done, get this done, get this done, and then wait, release it. Then you're hurry up and waiting for the next thing. So,
right.
Yeah.
So for, you said you work a lot with the fabric companies now. When you first started designing, how did that come about as far as like creating the samples and things like that? What was that progression to working with the companies?
Well, it's just little by little that you get acquired and picked up by those companies. So one of the huge catalysts for that was working with the magazines. I started working with them right away, and they get you in touch with fabric companies, and fabric companies typically want to be published in the magazine. So then you get those contacts, and then, once they understand your work ethic, then they might approach you and say, hey, would you design for this? And then another way that I got in was like with Michael Miller. I applied to be an ambassador, and I was an ambassador for them in 2020 or 2020. Sorry. Yeah, 2020. And so then becoming an ambassador, you get to be a pattern partner. And so that's how I, got in touch with Michael Miller. And then as my social media and everything else grew, fabric companies just started contacting me and saying, we want to work with you. And that's pretty much how it happens now. Like, I don't have to knock on doors anymore. If I'm not already working with them, they typically contact me and say, we want to work with you. So I remember the first time I got that phone call, I was like, I've literally been like hounding you for months to work with me, and finally you see me,
Yeah.
So, yay. And she's like, we never got those emails. And I'm like, So,
yeah, it's hard to kind of like stand out and how to get, especially via email, because I'm sure they get hundreds of them a day,
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So in your, because I actually did go through all of your patterns that are on your website, and I very much have a geometric brain as well, because I noticed most of yours are very geometrically designed. And would you say, because obviously they're not in order of like your very first pattern to the one that just came out, but would you say that your designing process like kind of has taken an evolution? Like, do you go through design phases, like I really like stars right now, or something like that?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because a few people have said that to me. And the thing is that I do have a huge variety of designs. So whether they're the hand stitching ones with my wool pennies, and so it's like kind of that folksy, sort of thing. And then I have some traditional ones, because a lot of the fabric companies that I design for, like the traditional designs, or the magazines, like the traditional designs. And I started releasing a lot of my modern solid designs on my own, because nobody would accept them in the beginning. And then what happened with that is that the pandemic happened, and the only yardage that was available with supply chain issues were solids. And so then people started wanting solids because that's what was available. And I'm like, I've been trying to, get these out there for, all of this time. And finally people are seeing, the value in these quilts or whatever. And it's really, even if you look at some of my more traditional designs, well, maybe not all of them, a lot of them, it really is about my use of color and value in the designs. I try to take traditional blocks that we all know and just spin them a little bit differently, with just changing the color and bringing a secondary design out in them. So stars and half square triangles and hourglass blocks just seem to be able to be something that I could easily manipulate to get that effect. But I do, experiment with a lot of blocks to get that. So there probably is an evolution. And I know that a lot of people have said, oh, I recognize that that's your quilt before I even see the name, but I don't know what my style is. So, other people recognize it, but I don't recognize it. I just sit down and design. So whether it's based upon color, or I have to design something for a fabric line, I try to get my inspiration from that line, what is happening. So I pull from all of these different things to get the design that, to get the design basically. So I think that there's a lot of variety. Yeah.
When you sit down to create a pattern, like, do you already have something in your head to get you started, or do you just kind of open up EQ and just start drawing?
There's a couple it just depends. Like if I see a fabric line, something might spark something right away and I'll have an idea. Oh, I kind of want to see where I can pull this. And then other times it's just pulling up EQ and playing with block arrangement. Maybe I'm going to change this block and add this, or see what happens if I put these two together. I just sort of play with it. I don't, but there's been some times where I get a fabric line and it's just not inspiring at all. And there was like this one design, I don't even remember what the fabric line was, but I tried all day long to just design something for this line of fabric. And it was so like really traditional and I was trying so hard, but I designed 5 other quilts that were very colorful and modern. And I was like, well, I am designing really great things, but I just can't pull out what I need for this line. So I had to go back to that, a couple days later and revisit it. But I did end up publishing every single one of those other designs that I was kind of working with in a different way. So it's kind of funny how it works. I don't know. It just happens sometimes. Sometimes it comes together quickly and other times it just doesn't. But I do have, hundreds of designs in my files just waiting. And sometimes it's just waiting for the perfect time. Sometimes it's just waiting for the perfect line to come along. But I do have like a stockpile of designs. So
how much time would you say that you spend just designing?
Well, in the last couple months, not a lot.
Well, yeah, outside of the moving part, yeah.
Yes. But I would say it's usually something that I do at night after I know that I absolutely cannot long arm anymore because either my shoulder is bothering me or I'm just can't focus enough to do. So I might spend a couple hours a night, 3 to 4 days a week, just kind of playing with design and designing some patterns.
So are you, just out of curiosity, are you a one-woman show or do you have, like, I know you said you work a lot with the fabric designers, the fabric companies and the magazines, but like do you have, are you a team like with your website or anything like that? Or is it all you?
So no, it's not all me. Years and years ago, I am technology challenged. So years and years ago, I probably started my blog, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago or something, my site and everything. And I have a friend who is an IT guy by trade, and he's also a quilter. And so I told him years ago, I will quilt for you if you do all of my IT work. And he's like, bingo, that's great, and so I do pay him now, because he just does a little bit more than he had to do back then when it was just a little blog. And so I do pay him to do some of that, but I do all of the inputting of the data and everything. But when I have an issue that I can't figure out, Mike, I need your help. So I have that backup resource. And then my husband will help me when he can. He'll help me fold patterns, cut kits. He does some computer quilting for me, that sort of thing. So he's sort of like the backup with that. And then for the first couple of years of pattern design, the first year I think I put out, I don't know how many designs, 100 and something. The next year was like 90 something. I sewed all of those samples myself, all of the magazine quilts myself, from start to finish. And this last year, I really needed a lot of help just because of the circumstances of my life. And, I had several deaths in my family and this move and different things. And I've had 2 friends that have really stepped up and helped sew samples for me. And I am just so grateful. I'm sewing a huge amount of samples myself, but I wouldn't have been able to keep up without them stepping up and helping me. So quilters are just really the best people. And I just couldn't have done it without, I have a huge support system. And then I pay a friend of mine to write my patterns. So I do all the designing. She does all of the tech writing and tech editing. And then I test the patterns when I sew the sample. And that's how I've been able to produce a lot. So I do hire out the things that I would slow me down in the process, basically.
Right. That makes sense. So for a person who is a new designer or somebody that wants to break into the world of pattern designer, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I think it's the same as any business, really. I think there's a huge amount of competition. I think that there's, all of this same thing that you would have in any job. And for me, I would say the best things that have what I've gotten out of all of the positive interactions that I've had with the companies that I've worked with is that I always do stuff that I say I'm going to do. I always turn things in early. I'm never late on any of my magazine stuff, any of the stuff that I'm asked to do. I always turn everything in early. If they need me to hurry up and do something because they need a last minute submission or whatever, I'm there. Like, I will do whatever that they need me to do. And I know that some people might think that that is, not valuing of their time or, whatever, but it's really built up those relationships for me. And it has solidified a lot of those things. And I've learned that I needed those relationships along the way to continue up the ladder. So I would say it's just, meeting your deadlines, doing what you say you're going to do, cultivate those relationships, because you just don't know how it's going to work out later. And all of those relationships have built upon and helped me get to where I'm going to be. And the quilting world is really small. They all talk to each other. And I found that out too, is like, the magazine companies work with every fabric company, and they share information and they know who's doing what. And so I think it's, the foundational stuff that you do for any business.
Are you a little tired of the same old quilting grind? Make these blocks, stitch these rows, and oh my gosh, I still have to do the binding. Are you looking for new quilting challenges both inside and outside your sewing room? Inspirations that'll stretch your imagination farther than you ever thought possible? My friend, my brand new Quilter's Bucket List Challenge books are just what you've been looking for, with seasonally themed challenges ranging from designing to fabric play to technique exploration that will have you creating all year round. And don't forget to use those coupons included in your Pro and VIP memberships to save on the cover price. Order your copy by clicking the link listed in the show notes. And now, more with our guest, Charisma Horton. That's really good advice. Okay, so some fun stuff. Because I have to ask you, or I want to ask you about Fabulous.
Yes.
You guys are now, for those that don't know, you're working with Michael Miller Fabrics, of course, and the infamous Rob Appel. And
Yes.
So the Fabulous pattern, and I really want to know, I'm curious, how did that all come about? Like, how did the project start? Did they approach you, or how did that happen?
Well, I was a Michael Miller ambassador in 2020. And at the end of the year, they said, okay, just so you know, now that you guys have been ambassadors this year, you're always going to be part of the Michael Miller family. So, we're going to be here for you, and we would love to collaborate on projects later. And I was like, okay, great. So I designed some block of the months, and I sort of held Fabulous back because it was my favorite one of that batch when I designed them, because I try to do several in the spring and fall for the markets or whatever. That's when they want to launch them. And so I kept that one behind because it was my favorite one, and I just really wanted it to be a special thing. And so I had pitched it to one company and they didn't accept it. And I just thought to myself, that is so crazy, because this is a really fabulous design. I mean, I actually named it Fabulous. And so then I said, okay, I'm just going to go to Michael Miller and Rob and see what they say. And so I sent them the picture and said, I want to do a block of the month with this. And they're like, okay, Charisma, we'll have a Zoom meeting, next week, blah, blah, blah. And what I found out later through the course of this is that they had told Rob he wasn't allowed to say yes to anything. They were just going to have this meeting and then they would get back to me later and all of this stuff. And so in the meantime, I had decided that since they were making me go through this Zoom meeting, I really wasn't expecting it because I was like, we're part of the family. I've worked with you for like a year now as an ambassador. Like, why can't you just say yes or no? So I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to go through all of their social media stuff. I'm going to go through all of the last 3 years of their block of the month. And I'm going to like get all of this data and give them this proposal that they're not going to be able to turn me down. So I did that. And then I brought up all of the stuff that they had done already. And then I said, this is what I want to do. And so they talked to me first and it was just this normal, hubbub, and I just let them talk. And then I'm like, okay, I heard what you had to say, but now you need to listen to me talk. And they were just kind of like silent. And then I spit out all of the data that I had gathered and said, and here's the list of what I want to do and, what I'm going to bring to the table. And nobody said anything. And I was like, hello, crickets, And I'm like, I will pay to fly out there. I want to film with Rob. I want to do all of this stuff. And this is what we need to do. I think this project is totally worth it. And what's funny is apparently they had their phones and they were texting back and forth. And he said, to one of the other gals, what am I supposed to say? And one of them was like, say yes, yes, because, that he wasn't supposed to say anything. And so he's like, well, Charisma, and he's like so professional. Well, Charisma, I think that might be something we could consider. And, let's, okay, and then, so we did make the arrangements and, the rest is, sort of history, but he's such, they interviewed me for the ambassador program the year before in 2020. And so he called ahead of that and talked for, I don't know how long. It was a really long phone call. Rob talks a lot. I talk a lot, but we just hit it off right away. Like I knew we would be lifelong friends because he's just this genuine, nice guy. And then when I flew down there to do the filming for Fabulous, his family, you could just tell, when you're around someone for their family for a week. So he has 2 kids and his wife and his dog. And they were just a lovely, lovely family. And they took me in and fed me dinner every day. And they were just so loving and kind and, all of that stuff. So he's just a genuine guy. And I think we'll just be friends for the rest of our lives. We have some other projects in the works and we're going to be working together again. For us, we kind of we brainstorm all of these ideas constantly. And then we have to bring ourselves down. Okay, let's see what we can manage. And, but it's a constant thing, but you will be seeing some more stuff from us. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Cause I've been watching the videos on YouTube and really enjoying them. So you guys play well together.
Okay.
So, for anybody that doesn't know about the fabric lines and their ambassadors. So what is it that an ambassador does?
Well, each company has their own program. So this year I'm actually an ambassador for Maywood Studio. And so for the Michael Miller ambassador program, it was really a perfect program for me because especially during 2020, everybody was shut down. I really just buckled in and did a lot with my business. I didn't have anything else to do, so it's not like I could go to the movie or go shopping. So I sewed and they gave me all the fabric that I wanted to make samples. And that's really when my business started catapulting because I didn't have to worry about the cost of buying my supplies. As long as, I used their fabric and promoted it, they gave me the fabric that I needed. But each company has a different set of rules or what they offer. And Maywood has been really fabulous because every month they have like a Zoom meeting for all of the ambassadors to maybe talk with a magazine editor or a fabric designer or someone in, really big in the industry to help talk about their journey or give some input into this or that. And so that's helpful for a lot of new beginners. And then they also give us quarterly or monthly projects to work on. They'll say, okay, here's the line that you have. This is the parameters, or, this one you're free to do whatever. We just want you to do this line, and, please make one social media post or something like that. So it's just a way for them to promote through us. But we also get product in lieu of that. And for a new pattern designer, not having to front the cost of all of that, because we really do have to put a lot of time, money, and effort into building a business. So
that's very true. So I just to kind of take a side turn here. I think one of the reasons you mentioned earlier about how a lot of people, when they see your designs, they know right away that it's yours. For me, that's true for me. I can almost always like, that's Charisma's. Yep, that's Charisma's. But it's because of your photos and how fun your photos are of your quilts. And they're always in like fun locations and stuff like that. How do you find these places to take these quilts or pictures of the quilts?
That's so funny. Everybody kind of comments on that. Even like Jenny Doan, when she's like, your photography, like, where are you finding these locations? And the funny thing about that is that I live in this really small farming community. We don't have like these fabulous buildings. We don't even have like a cute country town that a lot of people have. I mean, like, I find it adorable because this is where I live. It's, hometown and everything. But my husband and I will drive around and just look for that nook and cranny. And what's funny about the locals, they will say, okay, Charisma, I know I've seen that before, but where is it? Because I try to find those, just, you see it every day, but you just go past it because it's just part of your everyday thing. So like one of my pictures is on a grain bin that's like right in the middle of our town. And, I'll tell a story about it. And then there was like another one where I don't know, I'll go to just different places in town, and none of the locations are these spectacular locations that you would like stop and say, oh, I need to take a picture there. That's such a fabulous building. It's just the way that I style the quilt or hang the quilt or get that great angle. So there's just really nothing fabulous, because people have said to me, Charisma, I can't take those pictures because I don't live in an area where we have locations. I'm like, yes, you do. I promise you do. Because if you knew what our town looked like, you would not believe what I'm getting here. But the downside to that is that my quilts end up filthy dirty because they're dragged through, everything to get that photo. But I just think that photo is worth it. So I'll do it.
I totally agree. One of my passions is also photography, and I'm the same. Like I've laid some of my quilts over like old rusted out cars before. And yes. So I heard you mention Jenny Doan. And I also saw you did the Pinnovations quilts, and you did the session with Misty from Missouri Star. So what was that like?
Oh, it was amazing. I had a really great experience, and you'll see some more videos with Misty and I. And what is amazing about it is that, I'll tell you the story because it's kind of a fun story, is that I noticed that Jenny Doan was following me on social media, and she had commented on some things, but I don't know, when they're that big and famous, most of the time they have a social media person who is doing all that. So you don't know if it's actually that person that's talking to you. So I never really took it seriously because, it is just business, And so I would respond to some things, but I never it just wasn't a big thing for me. But I went to, I was teaching at in Salt Lake City at the Garden of Quilts show for Riley Blake last September, and Jenny recognized who I was. And she pulled me aside and talked to me in front of everybody. Like, there was a line behind me of people waiting to. She pulls me across in front of the stage to meet her daughters, and all of these people start following. They're like, who is this chick who just hijacked this line? Like, we want our photo with Jenny, you know. And I'm like, my face is red. I'm so embarrassed. I can't, like, and she's like, you're Charisma Horton. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, you're Jenny Doan. Oh my gosh. You know, like, what is going on here? And so she's like, wait for me. I want to talk to you. And after everybody had left, it's like really late at night. And what's funny is I had arrived with all of these other designers, but nobody knew who I was, and I didn't wear my name tag. And so I think they all just thought I was like a hired helper because I was helping other people like get ready and stuff. I just kind of do that sometimes. Anyway, so so she sits me down to talk to me, and she's like spitting out, I just really want to work with you. I love your designs. And she could name some of my designs, and I was so impressed by that. And I'm like, wow, it's actually Jenny on her social media, you know, like, wow, this is crazy. And so she said, well, what would you like to do? And I'm like, whatever you want me to do. Like, what am I going to say? Like, you're Jenny Doan. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. You know?
Right.
So she's like, okay, well, I'll get, contact my assistant and we'll get all of this worked out. And I was like, okay. And then I did. I flew down to Missouri and I hosted a retreat and I filmed. I was supposed to actually film an episode with Jenny, but that didn't work out because her studio was being rebuilt and it wasn't ready when I got there. So she's going to do some of my patterns without me, which I'm totally fine with. And so I spent a week down in Hamilton, and Jenny and Misty and all of them were really fabulous to work with and nice. You might have seen, since you've been researching me, that Ron, Mr. Jenny,
right.
I quilted a quilt for him, and he was just such a sweet, sweet man. I adore him. He was so kind to me, and he was holding my quilts, and he noticed my quilting, and he would point out all of my quilting to everybody, and he just became a really big fan of mine. And so he pulled me aside and asked me to quilt that quilt for him. And I was like, absolutely, you know, so I did. And then the little video, it was just very sweet. So
yeah, it was very, very cool. So when you were in Hamilton, was it all work, or did you get to explore the tiny little town that it is?
Yeah, so I had some time because I was at a retreat there. So I taught some girls for a few days, and we went through all of the stores on a scavenger hunt, and then Misty took me through the warehouse and gave me the tour there. And yeah, so it's a nice, sweet little town. Oh, and then the mayor picked us up and took us to the quilt museum, and I highly recommend the museum. It's really, I could have spent more time in the museum than any of the shops, but you know, I know I'm a quilter and all this stuff, but the museum was really a fabulous, fabulous place. I mean, they have a huge collection of like little sewing machines and all of these really rare type of finds. And the people that are curating and doing all of that are really just doing an amazing job.
Did you get to meet their son at the museum? Because I was there last summer. Yeah, last summer. And when I walked in, it was just him. He was, I'm guessing, maybe 12, 13-ish in there. And this child knew more about quilting than I did. And I do it for a living. So I was so impressed with him. And his mom let me videotape him a little bit. And he told me stories about some of the quilts that were on display. I was so impressed with this young man.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, it was during the week, so he might have been in school young. So.
That's very true. That's very true. Okay. So we know about a couple of things that you've mentioned, but what kind of things can we expect like through the rest of this year from you?
Well, I have some more block of the months coming, but also I designed this new template that I'm really excited about. I'm going to release a video, and I think Rob and I are going to do some things with it, but It's called the Banana Split series, and all of them use like jelly roll strips, 2.5-inch strips. And it's just this simple little technique, but I've created over 15 patterns to go with it. So you just buy this little acrylic template. You don't actually have to have it. The paper ones are included in all of the patterns, but it's a great way to use those jelly rolls and pre-cuts that we buy all of the time, and we let them, pretty ourselves, and we don't use them, and so I'm always trying to find ways to use them. And I created this little technique just to be able to, how it started was I just wanted to make this little block to use to do stitch and flip, but this makes it go a lot faster. And then once I realized, oh, this thing actually does these other things. And so I've just sort of been playing with designs and doing that. So I have the template coming out, or well, it's listed, but I haven't like really completely launched it yet. So I have that series, and then I'm going to, Rob and I will be doing another block of the month. I'm just not exactly sure when it will launch, but we were talking yesterday and we're trying to find the name for it because we both just really love the Fabulous name. And this one is equally stunning, but we need to have like that kitschy, fun, name that we can call it, because we really loved the name Fabulous. We used it in so many different ways that we want to kind of come up with something that's, good with that too. So yeah, we have, those are some of the things off the top of my head. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Like I said at the beginning, very busy lady. So at the end of my podcast, I always like to end with a just for fun question. And this one for you, I was actually curious because quilting is obviously such a huge part of your life. What, besides quilting, do you have any other hobbies, fun things you like to do?
Well, before the pandemic, I was doing pottery, and there was like at the community college here, they had just a weekly class, and I just went every week for years and years. And so obviously a lot of the same people, we all were really good friends. And, my daughter started going when she got old enough, and we could do anything we wanted, whether it was working on the wheel or sculpting or, doing whatever. And what I loved about pottery is it's sort of the same thing about quilting, is that we get to create something, basically from nothing, like you just take this material and you build something out of it, and then you can make something useful. I think that there's something very organic and beautiful about creating these things that we can still use and, surround ourselves with. So I sort of love that whole process. And what I loved about pottery is that it was always going to be a surprise, because I couldn't control a lot of things. Like with quilting, I can always have a seam ripper. Like there's always something that you can correct, whereas the pottery, you can't do that all of the time. And all of these things have to like come together perfectly to make sure that your piece comes out right. And I was always experimenting with glazes and drawing. And once the piece came out of the kiln, it didn't matter, if you tried to control stuff, something, different could come out of the kiln that way you thought it would be. And I just found that element of surprise to be exciting to me for whatever reason. Like I felt good that I couldn't control every single thing, and it wasn't for business, it was just for myself. And what I really loved too is that my daughter was doing that with me, and she loved pottery too, but she was more of a sculptor, where she could just take a lump and create whatever animal or anything that anybody said to her. So it was really a beautiful thing to watch, where I was doing a lot of bowls and platters and things like that I felt comfortable doing. But I don't know. So yeah, pottery was one of them. And then I don't know, I like reading, I like kayaking, hanging out with my dogs. I'm an avid animal lover, and I have a lot of dogs, and so that's really where we spend a lot of our time. So
awesome. Well, this has been awesome talking with you today, Charisma. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Behind the Quilts, a podcast brought to you exclusively by our amazing Quilters community members. Stay tuned next month when I sit down with the talented and always entertaining Linda J. Hahn. Until then, as always, my friend, happy quilting.